Hi guys, my name is Andy Tidy and welcome back to another series of Canal Hunter. And when I say another series of Canal Hunter, this is going back to the roots. I'm going to start looking for some more abandoned sections of the Birmingham Canal navigations. This is series 6 of Canal Hunter, and I think it's fair to say that in a very literal way we've crossed a watershed. Till now, I've been exploring the lost 60 miles of canals which exist to the east of the Dudley watershed. That's the hills which are pierced by the Dudley and Netherton tunnels. Well, for this series, I'm going to look for the lost sections of the canals to the west. These are the Dudley canals, Dudley number 1, Dudley number 2, and the Stour Bridge. A drop of rain which falls here has a 50-50 chance of flowing to the east, down the River Tame and out through the Trent to the North Sea. But if by vagaries of a chance fluke gust of wind that same drop falls slightly to the west, it's going to drain down through the River Stour into the River Severn and finally out into the Atlantic. As I say, one of the country's great watersheds. All the canals on this side of the hill started out as independent canals, but in the same way that the Worley and Essington was absorbed into the BCN in the mid-1800s, so too were the Dudley canals. I have to admit that I have really struggled over the summer months to decide how to tackle these canals. Should I start at the Selly Oak end and cover the Lappel Canal and the Lappel Tunnel? Or should I start at the other end, at the Stour Bridge extension, and work my way to the south? I really didn't know. But in the end, I have settled on a happy medium. I am starting bang in the middle. And behind me, you can see where I am, Bumblehole. And I've chosen to time my visit here to Bumblehole at Netherton to coincide with the annual Black Country Boating Festival. In many ways, the Black Country Boating Festival is a great end-of-term jamboree party for the traders and the boaters alike. However, this year we sold out of stock in Worcester, so the boats are tucked up at home and I've started Canal Hunter early. Behind me you see Cobb's Mill, one of the old mining pumping engines, and beyond that there is the fairground attached to the Black Country Boating Festival and the Black Country Festival itself. And you may notice from some of my shots that I've acquired a new eye in the sky. Yes, I've succumbed and bought a drone. But I promise you, I won't overdo the drone thing. Just a few shots to illustrate what I'm trying to say. Now, there are lots and lots of abandoned sections of canals in the Netherton area, but we'll come back and explore those later in the series when we've got the place to ourselves. For today, I want to take a look at the obscure of the obscure, the Gads Green Reservoir. Now you can see that we are very high up here, and we are on a high, pretty dry ridge. And this altitude caused real problems for the canal builders. They needed a water supply, and they needed a water supply long before the canals down here were built. They needed a supplementary water supply to feed the Dudley Canal. The original is now the Dudley number 1 canal, which lies away beyond this hill. And they looked to this hillside for a solution. And their solution was the Gads Green Reservoir. That's tucked in just above the fairground that you see over here, and the reservoir embankment should be in these trees. That's what I'm going to look for. Well, I'm relying heavily on the writings of Ian Langford, who explored a lot of the history of this area back in 1970. And when he came, he found evidence of the old feeder line that ran across from just behind Cobb's Mill into the reservoir. These days, the most you can find is some slight undulations in the meadows. But what I'm really looking for is the down wall itself. Ask a local canal enthusiast to name the main reservoirs of the BCN, and you get answers like Rotten Park and the Chasewater Reservoir. Very few will ever think of the Gads Green Reservoir. It sat just a couple of 100 yards away from the western portal of the Netherton Tunnel. just up above the fairground, which is in operation during today's Black Country Boating Festival. These days, the Bumblehole Local Nature Reserve is an oasis of calm and tranquility. Well, apart from festival weekend, of course. And it's covered in trees and grass. But only a few decades ago, it was a sea of post-industrial ruins. But our quest, the Gads Green Reservoir, wasn't built initially to serve the canals in its immediate vicinity. They didn't exist. It was built as a supplementary water supply to feed into the Dudley Canal, the original Dudley No. 1 canal that terminated at Parkhead. This need became pressing in 1790, when the work on the Dudley Tunnel was nearing completion. And of course the trade started to increase no end, and that meant more water was needed. And you have to remember, in 1790 the Birmingham Canal on the far side of the hill were the rivals, and they weren't going to let a drop of water escape to the west if they could possibly help it. So the Dudley Canal looked slightly to the south to increase the catchment area to feed into their upper level canal at Parkhead. At nearly 600 feet up, water is in really short supply, but there were a few springs up here. And so the original 10.5 acre Gads Green Reservoir was built here, just above what was to become the western portal of the Netherton Tunnel. So let's take a walk into the undergrowth, see if we can find anything of the dam wall. Now, almost immediately as we enter into the trees, I find that I'm walking on what feels like a railway embankment. The ground is falling off sharply to the left and to the right, and it was to the right that the reservoir should be found. Let's take a walk along the dam wall. I'll speed it up for the sake of brevity, but this is undoubtedly Gads Green Reservoir dam wall. And this basin represents the last remnant of the Gads Green Reservoir. The embankment which held the water back ran across here, and I entered the trees about up there. The water covered the area represented by the grass today, and also went up underneath where the houses are at the far end. I suspect a lot of mine tailings have been regraded across here. As I walk along here under the embankment, it is pretty squidgy underfoot. I would imagine this makes for a fairly green but rather heavy football pitch. And the bank to my right stands about 10 feet tall. I suspect that the ground at the base here has been built up somewhat over the years. It's hard to work out how many lockfalls it contained, but considering the lack of surface water up here, this represents a sizable body of water. And Here, as I suspected, quite close to the outfall point, there is a land drain. But that's not all there is to the built remains of this reservoir base. Come with me into the woods, because I've just discovered something of an old built relic. The old maps of the area show a pipe coming out into the reservoir and a shaft. And this was the shaft which controlled the exit of the water from here into the feeder channels. And here in the woods there is the old pipe shaft still standing, a bit crumbly here and there, but unmistakably part of the reservoir infrastructure. If we look inside, we can see that it's circular in shape, obviously largely filled up with rubble these days. But this was the control valve for letting water out of the Gads Green reservoir. I have to say the old reservoir embankment does make a very fine noise screen. The fairground is loud on the other side, and it's almost imperceptible over here. And yet, whilst we are in the Gads Green reservoir basin, let's go and take a walk to the far side and just get a feel for the size and scope of this thing. And I'll tell you a little bit about its history and how it came to an end. With the Dudley No. 2 canal completed, the volume of trade in the area continued to increase. And it was decided that the Gads Green reservoir just wasn't large enough. So it was expanded from its 10.5 acres by a further 4 acres. And that mostly filled an area just slightly to the south. How deep? Very difficult to tell these days on account of the amount of infill which has been pushed into the mound which I'm standing on today. The old records tell us that when Josiah Clowes built this dam, it was made from earth and iron slag, but then faced with bunter sandstone. Now, most of it is so overgrown you couldn't possibly hope to find any, but in some of the tracks that lead out of the old basin and up onto the rim, you find signs of the old construction materials. And here are some of the sections of the old bunter sandstone still embedded in the path. Still, in a way, doing the job that they were created to do, which was to stabilise the bankside and mitigate erosion. Well, as a reservoir, this was always prone to leakage. You see, there were so many old mine workings underneath, they caused the land to sink, or swag as they call it locally. And you can see the impact of this swagging on the residual dam wall. It's up and down all over the place. And all this swagging caused the boundaries of the water to change. So when eventually time came to sell the land, it was very difficult to work out exactly who owned what. Anyhow, the reservoir itself was drained and decommissioned in the early 1900s. Certainly by 1912 it was just an area of open space. And after a number of decades, the site was sold to the Dudley Corporation, or Dudley Council as it is now, in 1947, and it became incorporated in as an area of public open space. A function it continues to do admirably, if somewhat wetly, through to today. Well, technically that is the end of this episode of Canal Hunter. We've explored the long abandoned Gads Green Reservoir, one of the least known reservoir sites on the BCN. And next time we will move forward to the point where the water from this reservoir entered into the canal system at Parkhead. But till then, I can't really leave this area without at least having a look at the mighty Netherton Tunnel. So this is the portal of the mighty Netherton Tunnel. It may have been built quite late after the amalgamation of the Dudley Canals and the Birmingham Canal navigations, and it was completed in 1858. But its conception was way back in 1792 when the Dudley No. 2 canal was built. Even today, it is among the top 5 longest navigable tunnels in the UK. But maybe because it is so tall and so wide, so straight and so airy, it never feels quite that long. But this was a tricky tunnel to build. It went through a lot of old mine workings, which made the ground profoundly unstable. Don't you just bless those old mine workers? As such, they had to put a brick invert in, which basically means a brick base. But even to this day, that base keeps moving, and periodically millions of pounds are spent keeping this tunnel operable. It has the distinction of being the widest tunnel and the last one built. It has a towpath running on each side for ease of operations. It had gas light and then electric light powered by an innovative turbine at the far end. And although it was built with many shafts for construction purposes, these days just 7 of them remain open to provide a measure of ventilation inside. Anyhow, that really is outside the scope of this Canal Hunter episode, but I couldn't leave without just a brief mention of the Netherton Tunnel. So for now, cheerio, thank you for watching, happy hunting, and I will see you soon. Cheerio!